This Thrive Loud episode is brought to you by Hinge Consulting. Success on Amazon hinges on well-executed strategies. Contact Hinge Consulting to learn about total Amazon channel management and to see if your business has what it takes to grow over 300% over the next 12 months. That's Hinge Consulting at hingeconsulting.co.
Ah, the sweet sounds of spring. Don't you love it? The birds are singing and all those, other sounds. I love spring. Welcome to spring, Thrive Loud listeners. We made it. As you're transitioning from the brisk cold of winter into the sunshine-filled spring, make it your springtime resolution to listen to the inspirational speakers that we have here on Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond. Cleaning the house? Listen to Thrive Loud. Doing yard work? Thrive Loud. Going for a run outside? Thrive Loud, people! We put all of these shows together for you, our listeners, and you are totally missing out if you're not tuning in. So grab your phone, computer, iPod, whatever it is, subscribe to Thrive Loud on wherever you listen to podcasts, and start getting inspired. Pretty soon, you'll start thriving in your own life each and every day.
Now I'm getting really excited. Okay, this is the part where I'm going to get loud.
Holy crap, here we go.
I like telling stories.
I learn best through experiences.
Everything I do is because of everything I did.
Talk about having maximum impact while having a ton of fun.
When you can net through that, what you do leave behind for your listener will have more impact.
Wow, bring it on.
It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. Today on Thrive Loud, we bring you CBS Sports Network and ESPN college hockey analyst. He has been an NHL scout for the Montreal Canadiens and a player and coaching development coordinator for the junior New York Islanders, a development coach in USA Hockey's coaching education program for over 22 years. He's a huge proponent of the American development model that USA Hockey developed. That is something we will translate to the Thrive Loud community, which is pretty cool. He is a longtime good friend of mine and a man who has lived his passion every day by being around the game he loves. Thrive Loud listeners, Dave Starman, welcome to Thrive Loud.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Lou.
So the Thrive Loud community needs to know that years and years ago, and we won't put the metric behind it, Dave and I grew up in the same town. And you can imagine living in the boroughs of New York City, there weren't a lot of hockey options. And we would have days where maybe foot or even roller hockey would take place. And we would go out and we'd put nets in the middle of the street, have to move over when UPS trucks would come by. And there was this guy completely guarded up in full professional ice hockey equipment playing out on the streets. And I saw this guy. I'm like, this guy's amazing. He's really good. What the heck is he doing? I was probably like, I don't know, single digits at that point and looking up to this guy. And here he is on the other end of the microphone here. Years later, play goalie, has been around the sport constantly. And just to let you know, I tried to copy you by playing hockey in New York City, but could never live up to the same abilities that you've lived up to.
That's frightening to think about. But yeah, we had a lot of good times, back on the streets playing ball hockey, and then you'd find a tennis court and you can use it for roller hockey. And during the winter, it was great because they used to take the nets down, so you'd have the court. The whole trick was just don't run into the posts, and but the surface was great for. Remember the old polyurethane wheels, and that's when it was 2 in the front and 2 in the back before inline happened. But you mentioned a good point. It was always a passion, and it's great to know every morning that when I wake up that hockey is going to be part of the day. As opposed to everything else, whether it be family or other work or that kind of thing, just knowing that the game is a part of the day-to-day life 365 days a year is something I never dreamed of.
And it's pretty crazy because if you're a fan, and by the way, this episode is coming out here on April 5th, which is the first day of what's called the Frozen Four. And for those that follow college hockey, it's their version of the Final Four. And if you turn on ESPN News or ESPN2, you will see Dave as the in-between period commentator giving you his highlights. And how crazy is that, by the way, that I turn it on and I see you and I'm like, oh my God, there he is. And he's doing it. Let's talk a little college hockey here. I'm a little heartbroken because when they announced the tournament, my beloved Big Red Cornell University just failed to show what offense looked like against BU. But it's been a lot of fun and some unbelievable talent. And over the years, it only continues to get better and better each year. From your view, give us a quick recap and bring us up to speed as to what's ahead for this weekend.
Well, the one thing that I think the NCAA is probably thrilled about going to the Frozen Four is that you've got three really big brand name teams that are going to compete. You've got a Michigan-Notre Dame game that'll be the late game on Thursday, April 5th. And in the morning, or not the morning, but in the early afternoon, you've got Ohio State, and they're going to play Minnesota Duluth. And Minnesota Duluth is a longtime hockey powerhouse, and they've been to the tournament the last 4 years. Their senior classes has really been an amazing group of kids to watch and develop. And Minnesota Duluth was the national finalist last year, losing to the University of Denver, who just got eliminated by Ohio State. But between Ohio State, Michigan, and Notre Dame, three teams from the Big Ten Conference, you've got that brand name, and I think that is something that might even attract the casual fan, or certainly will attract the alumni bases. And, you certainly know how big the alumni bases are with the Big Ten schools. And I think that, for viewership purposes, that goes a long way to help continue market what has really become a great product and a huge development path to the National Hockey League.
No, it is true, and it continues to each year grow more and more. Look, they're getting all these games were televised, which several years ago that wasn't the case, and it's fun to watch up and down hockey leading up to the Sweet 16 and then Elite Eight of these teams. A lot of these games went to overtime. Notre Dame just barely inched by in their first round matchup before they advanced on. And it's exciting. And I think what's great to your point about these big brand names, Michigan, by the way, having a team in the Frozen Four and the Final Four in basketball, which is just unbelievable. It's capturing a lot of different areas out there. And I think each year it gets more and more. So it's got to be cool for you from the seat you're in.
Oh, absolutely. Because you just know that there's always an anticipation with this tournament. You always know the rabid fan bases will be there. The University of North Dakota has got one of the most passionate fan bases of any college sport that I've ever seen. It's like Alabama football. It's like Duke basketball. Their fan base is off the charts passionate about what their team is and what their team represents to their community. And so North Dakota not being in the tournament this year was kind of a downer, but it's the story that has gotten written by the four teams that have made it, like I said, including the Big Ten teams, which bring a little bit of that star power name to it, is really unique. And I just think that when you look at Ohio State as an alumni base and as a fan base, they're a fan base that certainly supports their school. I mean, I think their fans would show up and watch their team play tiddlywinks, to be honest. I mean, that's just the kind of fan base that they have. The Michigan, you certainly know the passionate Michigan fan base, and it's certainly there with Notre Dame, who are worldwide. So this should be pretty unique. I think that this takes on a much different tone, not just from a hockey sense, but just from a business sense, just from a marketing sense, and just from a eyeball perspective. I think that even the person who's not the hockey fan, but is an alum of those schools, is going to realize that not only is their school playing, but they're playing a rival that has been around forever. And just think of the capabilities of the marketing possibility of like a Michigan-Ohio State final.
It would be intense. I was just thinking the same thing as you were saying that. I'm like, oh my God, that would garner every news headlines and probably get top billing on there, which is great. All right, so let's rewind a little bit, Dave, because look, you know hockey better than most, and you've been around the game your whole life. Can you walk us through a little bit of the journey on how your career led into from both broadcasting and obviously coaching? Because like hockey is one of the toughest sports to play. And it's even probably just as hard to become successful and become a brand within the media community as well. So maybe give a little bit of that guiding story of how you got from where you started out and how this just continued to evolve into you're the go-to expert in college hockey right now, which is a lot of fun.
I got to be honest. I've been extremely lucky. And, my wife, Shireen, is in this business as well. We actually met covering college hockey. And, we've both laughed about, and we're on the same broadcast crew with CBS Sports Network, which I think is really neat. And, the one thing that we often talk about is how fortunate our paths have been to get us where we are. And a lot of it involves luck. A lot of it involves being in the right place at the right time. But the number one thing involves preparation. And it's something that we both take seriously. And I think that when you go back, and I think to myself, when I go back, all the way to back when I was a kid, the preparation that I put into getting ready for the next day's game was always a big thing to me. And it came from reading books about what players who are playing in the NHL and had made the NHL, did to get themselves ready. And, I grew up reading a lot of Stan Fischler's books about the great players that played the league. And it was just a matter of dialing in and following what at that time was your dream. And, I remember a lot of times when I was a kid, and you were probably at a lot of these parties where it'd be 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock on a Friday night. And I would say, listen, I got to go. I got a 9 o'clock game tomorrow morning, and I got to get up at 6:30 to start getting ready for this thing. And so those are some of the sacrifices, not only myself, but like a lot of players have to make to make sure that they're ready. So I think that the approach that I had to being ready for every game is something that I still carry with me, getting ready for games, whether I'm scouting them or broadcasting them or even, when I was still coaching them. It's that to me is the number one thing that is important to anybody who really wants to get far in their business. And that is the amount of homework you do and the preparation physically, mentally, emotionally you put into it. But, growing up in Queens, you never think to yourself that you're ever going to work in the NHL. You're just going to watch it for the rest of your life and be happy about that too, right? And, there's joy in just being a fan your whole life. But I just knew that, straight through playing my youth hockey, whether it be Pee-wee, Bantam, Midget, and having some success and knowing I wanted to play at some potential college level, whether it be Division I, Division III club, whatever, I knew I wanted to be in that world. And I knew I wanted hockey to be a big part of my world. And I was lucky enough to play at the University of Hartford and had a couple of good years there. And through my time there and some internships I did, one thing led to another, and through a enormous series of accidents, here's where I wound up. But it's to me, it was the people who you knew, the effort that you put into it, and the desire to keep moving ahead were, I just think, three huge components in what's happened.
So I'll echo the fact of Dave's preparedness. We before we went on live to record this right here, he's like, I need some stuff beforehand to understand exactly what's going to happen, which any great color analyst would need to understand the game plan for what's coming ahead, which totally maps out with what Dave would do, which I find interesting because in hockey, which is one of the fastest games you can possibly view on television. I've always said, you go to a hockey game, you have to go there in person to really appreciate it. And television has gotten so much better in the way the analysis, but also the technology. I've actually seen you break down, games and plays and understand who's hot and who's not, to understand how people are moving. Give the viewers a little bit of behind the scenes of the research that you do to get sharp and be prepared for the stuff that you do. Because I think it's actually really cool. It shows the passion of how much you love the game and how much you have to understand what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's a good question. And when we do our coaching education program stuff, when I work with younger people in our business that want to become analysts, no matter what sport it is, the one thing that I think is great is that our community shares the process that you need to utilize to get prepared for these games. And, for me personally, I watch a ton of film, and that goes back to my coaching days in terms of getting ready for game prep and trying to break down another team. So when I know that I got a game coming up that weekend, the first thing I do is I download the games from whatever conference server that I can access, through the generosity of the coaches in the leagues. And I will watch the last game or two of each of the two teams that are playing in the next game. And that gets me started. Then there's calling coaches. There's calling scouts that that are your friends of yours. There's calling other coaches in the leagues outside of the two teams that you're playing because they've played these teams before. So it's relying on your network of friends, colleagues to gain some other things that maybe your eyeballs aren't seeing, or you've seen them and you want to further it up by asking a coach who might have just played that team, hey, this is what I saw you guys do with these guys. Is that what I did see, or was there something else that you had in mind? And people are always good about sharing information, and I never want the company secrets, but I at least want to get a framework of the two teams that are coming in. Then there's player research, and player research it's like studying for a test. That's my wife and I joke about this all the time when we're doing game prep together. It's like cramming for that big exam in college. at the end of your semester or at the end of your week. And it's a matter of researching the players, whether it be internet research just for game clippings or calling the sports information directors at schools and asking if they can supplement some of the things that you have watched, whether it be, like I said, newspaper clippings, magazine clippings, the fact that YouTube and video links and team websites are such a huge part of what we do now, that is a huge way to gather information. So it's a combination of researching the players, researching the teams, researching recent trends. Like I said, for me personally, watching a ton of film going into a game, I'm an X's and O's guy, I always have been. So for me, it's about being able to explain to the viewer, here's what I saw of these two teams. Here's what, if you look for, you will see with these two teams. And here's why one of these two teams will be successful through the methodology that we're trying to bring to you during the game.
It's great stuff. And I got a good question on this point. When you are in this role, and it is a unique spot versus guys that do play-by-play and are calling the game as it's happening, you're the one who has to think very quickly. And when there's a break in the action, break out a play if you're doing the play-by-play, or if you're in the studio summarizing what's happened in an entire period. The work of actually being on air and broadcasting, do you like that component of it, or do you like the work that's behind it that you just described, all the research? Because I've heard different things from different people. What they love more, the X's and O's of the game, or being able to communicate it out to everybody?
You're going to laugh, but the preparation part of it to me is what I thrive on. To be honest, I love that aspect of it. And it goes hand in hand with the scouting work I do for the Montreal Canadiens, because there's all kinds of game prep involved in that side of it too. It's one blends into the other, because the more games I'm watching, the more scouting I'm doing. And like, I'll never write a scouting report on a game that I've broadcasted, but I could supplement scouting reports on players as I'm watching all of this film. And it helps me get to know these players that much better. But the on-air part of it, the adrenaline that you get when you know that the camera's on and people are listening to what you're saying, hopefully paying attention to it, hopefully learning something from it, and being able to be better educated in what you're trying to convey to them. To me, that's kind of the rush. I guess it's the same thing like when a teacher is teaching a class and they can look out at their kids and realize who's getting it and who's not. And they certainly know which kids they need to work with more. And you get that rush of you're trying to present something and you see the acceptance of the person listening to it, that they understand it and appreciate what you just told them. To me, I think that's huge. Now, you don't get that on live TV because of the fact that you're looking into a camera. But every once in a while, you see a camera guy raise their eyes and say, and you realize that you might have reached them in a small way. But when you're doing live presentations to coaching groups and things like that, it's really neat to see the acceptance level on there. But I just think that the rush of being in the arena and feeding off of the excitement of the arena, of what's going on in your game, and conveying what you have done all week to your audience is kind of a neat thing to do.
It's awesome. And I want to move this to something that you're working on. You've been working on for a very long time, and it's something you're very passionate about. Share with us a little bit about this American development model that's going on with the USA Hockey. And I'm saying this from a point that the Thrive Loud community, we've got people who are thriving in their businesses, their lives, their passions, and there are people that are always breaking down different ways of how processes work and how you develop talent, teams, individuals, and leaders. And maybe you can give a little bit of a background as to this developmental model, because I think it's pretty fascinating. So share with the listeners more about it.
I'll tell you what, for many, many years, we coached the game one way. And this goes across all sports. A lot of coaches were doing it the way that they did it. They learned it as a player. And the coaching community was evolving, but it was probably evolving slower than maybe a lot of other businesses and teaching components were going. And what USA Hockey did, and I give them so much credit for this because it took guts to do this. What they did about 15 years ago is they started doing research based on what every federation around the world was doing. So they incorporated what the Swedes and the Finns were doing, what the Russians were doing, what the Canadians were doing, because they've been so successful for years, but not just the big federations. They went through what the Slovaks were doing, what the Czech Republic was doing, the Danes, the Belarusians. They went worldwide. But not only that, they also started looking at what other sports were doing to make their games better. And through this combination of research and fact and science, so they weren't guessing, through research, fact, and science, they put together this American development model. And what the ADM is, it is an age-appropriate, age-specific, long-term athlete development model for young players so that you're not treating an 8-year-old like a 16-year-old. And
Right.
we were for a long time. Like we would be out there. Under 8 is called mites in the United States. And we were training mites and we were coaching mites, much like we would be coaching the midget age group, which is 15 and 16 and a little older. And we were starting to realize that it was USA Hockey started to realize that the participation numbers of the younger players in our country were dropping off at a dramatic rate. And one of the reasons why is because a lot of kids at too many practices were standing around bored to death because they were in straight lines. They weren't doing a lot of movement. There was a lot of soliloquy and lecturing going on the ice and not as much action as there should be. And they broke it down into its simplest form of, if we keep these kids moving, skating, passing, shooting, receiving, all the fundamentals of our game, and we keep them doing it repetitively in smaller areas so they're constantly engaged on the puck and on the play, that we are not only going to retain more players, but we're going to make better ones. And when you look at the player retention numbers now, especially in the areas that were going way down, and that 11, 12, 13 group was really dipping, those numbers are now way back up to record levels. And over the last decade, it's taken a lot of coaches. Now, I'm 50 years old. It's taken a lot of coaches like myself in our age group to go from almost one end to the other, especially those of us that have coached at the pro level, that have coached at the junior level. It's taken us some time to understand the sheer brilliance of what this system is and change our philosophies to the point where the emphasis is no longer on building winning elite teams through structure and system. It is now about building winning kids through development and activity, and those players will become part of winning teams just because of the fact that they are going to be better players than the kids that they're playing against. And it's a wonderful model. I think it has helped our kids grow. I think it's helped our coaches grow. And when you look across the spectrum of other sports, tennis is doing it with 10 and under tennis. Lacrosse has done it. Basketball has done it. There are a lot of other sports that have shrunk the court or shrunk the playing surface to match the size of the kid that is playing. And I know USA Football is getting on board with it too. Look at youth baseball and T-ball. And T-ball is a perfect example because it's a smaller field for smaller kids, right? So the logic of it really is brilliant. And at the mite level, we've gone to cross ice instead of full ice. We've gone to 4-on-4 instead of 5-on-5. And we are seeing so many kids come off the ice smiling, sweating, and telling mom and dad, I want to do this again. And that was the goal.
That's awesome, by the way. And thank you for the recap of that, because I've heard different versions of what it is. And that was the best description I've heard in breaking it down. I was actually laughing. I was thinking about USA soccer. Soccer probably needs to go back and talk to hockey because of some of the issues that the national team has happened over the years. But you're seeing it in youth soccer too. Like I drive around my area and I see youth soccer games going on with the smaller nets, and they're playing it on smaller fields, and kids are much more involved. And instead of being 11-on-11, it's 5-on-5 and 6-on-6. And it's a phenomenal idea because kids are just they're getting the big word today is now touches. It's not necessarily playing time; it's touches. How many times can you touch the puck or touch the ball or be involved in the play? And the more you're doing that, the more you're cognitively processing what you need to do. So you're teaching yourself a lot of the IQ you need to improve your positioning on the court, on the field, on the pitch, on the ice, just through trial and error. And I think you know as well as I do, the more things you teach yourself, probably the longer you retain them. No, it's very, very true. And I like this example here. I'm going to segue to something which I think is going to help bridge to a fun conversation. And I love asking this question to all the Thrive Loud guests. Dave, when you have trouble thriving, who do you personally turn to get back on the thriving track?
You know what? That's a really good question. There are a couple of people that have been really important in that world. Number one is my wife, because we're in the same business. And, the fact that she's a broadcaster and has won a couple Emmys and has been really accomplished in this business. Sometimes I think when I'm in a rut TV-wise, I can turn to her because she gets it. And being that she's my colleague on air, it's a huge help. It's almost like having a coach in-house, and she's been doing it longer than I have. And it's kind of nice to be able to share ideas and swap ideas with her. My play-by-play guy for hockey is Ben Holden. He's another guy that at times I reach out to. My supervisor at CBS is Ross Malloy, and he's another guy that I can turn to, and because he's been in the business a long time and is pretty accomplished. So I've got a little network of people that I can go to and swap ideas with and exchange ideas with. And on the hockey side, it's amazing. There are many, whether it be people in my youth hockey organization, the Junior Islanders, whether it be people in my pro organization, the Montreal Canadiens, whether it be just coaches I know around the country. I think to me, it's not one or two people. It's a network of trusted people that I have known for a long time who know me and know how I thrive and kind of what makes me tick and what makes me go. Those are the people that I turn to a lot because it's an honest community of people who are willing to help each other get better. And without those folks, there's no way I get where I got to.
I got to jump in and I'm going to ask this question. I hear that there's an amazing story on how you met your wife and broadcast partner here that had to deal with makeup. Can you share that with the listeners if that's okay, Dave?
We can share that one. This is a good one. So my wife and I met. We weren't even colleagues. I knew who she was from watching a lot of her work at Fox Sports Detroit. And I found out the day we met, she had no idea who I was. And we met at a officials symposium in 2007 in Detroit. There was a conference called the CCHA, which is now defunct. The teams have moved to different spots. And for a good stretch of time, I was just killing the referees in that league. And I called the commissioner of the league, because I'm a pretty good rules guy. And I said, either I'm misinterpreting your standard of play initiative or your guys stink. So one or the other, but do me a favor? Can I come to one of your seminars and one of your referees training camps and kind of bond with these guys and understand how they're seeing the game so I can better represent what they see on the air? And the commissioner thought it was a great idea. And at the last moment, he opened it up to some of the local media, and my wife, Shireen, was covering this for Fox Sports Detroit. So I remember after a morning session, I went up and introduced myself to her and I said, "Hi, I'm Dave Starman." And she kind of looked at me like I've got my own problems, but thanks for saying hi. She had no idea who I was. And we started to develop a friendship. And then when CBS bought what was then CSTV, I got a call from somebody at CBS who said to me, "High def is not your friend." And after trying to decipher what that possibly could have meant, she said, "I can see that you've broken your nose. I can see you've had stitches. I can see you've had chicken pox. It's not complimentary to your face if you've got some defects on it." And I thought to myself, okay, I'm about to get fired. She said, "You need to wear makeup." And I went, "Oh, no problem. I got it." And Shireen and I had some conversations like the past week or so about like she had just gone makeup shopping to do some stuff and replenish her stuff. And I thought to myself, this is a great idea as a potential first date. I have to go makeup shopping. I'm not going by myself. So on of all days, Valentine's Day, we wound up having our first date, and our first date was makeup shopping for me at Lord & Taylor's in Novi, Michigan. And I figured if you can survive that kind of night, you can survive anything. And that's how it started.
You know that hockey has changed maybe for the better and has been more holistic if guys around the hockey business are meeting around makeup. So it's definitely taken a change for the better or for the newer, if you would. But that's a great story.
No question. Hey, it's John Buccigross at ESPN always says when I'm on the air with him, he goes, "Here we are, just two guys in makeup sitting and talking hockey." So, I mean, it's the way it works in the land of high def.
Oh, man, I love it. Before we get to some of the two funny questions I want to get, Dave, give all the plugs on where people can see you, find you. We've got the Frozen Four this weekend, all the coverage. Let's list all that and all the places that they could learn more about Dave Starman.
There are times where I advertise where I'm going to be on. And I feel like I'm tying my own noose. But for the main thing, I put a lot of hockey stuff out on social media, on Twitter. It's at D Starman Hockey, and I try to get out a lot of stuff regarding either college hockey that I'm covering, some opinions, stuff that USA Hockey is doing, just great stuff I see from around the country and around North America that will help coaches, will help players, will help hockey families make better decisions and learn more about the game. So the main thing is for me is social media wise is Twitter. And then obviously we're on air on Thursday, April 5th. The Frozen Four is on ESPN 2. Those are the two semifinal games. And then the Frozen Four will be Saturday night on ESPN, and I will be in studio between periods for that. For parents who want to learn more about the ADM, you can go online. It's www.admkids. So that's Alpha David Mary Kids.com, and you can learn a tremendous amount about what this program is, why it's important, why it works, why we're not going to go back to the old way of laps, lines, and lectures. We're going to continue to keep kids moving, and that is a great way to learn. You can also access it through the USA Hockey's website, which is www.usahockey.com. And if you're a goalie parent like my parents were, and God bless them for being them, you can go to www.usahockeygoaltending.com. That's the new site that we've created for the goalie nation around the country. And I think it's a really good instructional tool for young goalies and their families.
I think it's wonderful that Dave has done a shout out here to his parents who One thing we know for certain is that there's probably 4 people definitely listening to this broadcast, and that would be both the Starmans and the Diamonds who are probably listening to this. So if they could figure out how to download a podcast, which I know Mr. Ronnie Starman might be having trouble with, Dave, we're going to have to give him a link directly. Not a chance he's going to know how to listen to this.
Well, he'll listen to it, but he's not going to download it. I'll have to help him on that. But you bring up a great point. Nobody gets where they are without at least some help, if not a tremendous amount of help from their folks, especially young athletes. And for all those mornings that they got up at 4 a.m. to drive me to rinks and schlep me all over the Northeast for games, on that note, I couldn't thank mom and dad enough. And you certainly know how that works. And you know my folks, so you know the dedication they put into it.
I do, and I know it. You're only paying it forward in this particular world, doing it again, I'm sure. So, Dave Starman, signature question here at Thrive Loud. Your all-time favorite movie?
Listen, I wouldn't be a hockey guy if I didn't say Slapshot. So let's put that front and foremost. And having coached in the minor leagues for about 8 years, I lived a lot of that. So it's kind of where art met reality. I would also say this. I know this is kind of cliched, but to me, The Godfather is still the greatest movie ever made. I could watch it daily if I had to. I think it's phenomenal. Goodfellas in that same vein, The Godfather Part 2 in that same vein, and kind of on a underrated thing, For Love of the Game with
it's a good movie. Kevin Costner.
Yeah, I mean that's just another one I can watch a ton, and it's a nice kind of bond between my wife and I. I know that she grew up in Detroit as a huge Tigers fan, so it's kind of one of those neat little movies that we can watch together and each grab something out of.
They do a great job of that, and they build it up throughout, weaving time back and forth throughout every inning, which is pretty cool. So always love that movie. This has been a true treat, Dave. I am so glad we did this, and I got to tell you, your message is spot on. For those that are not the biggest sports fans and that are listening, there are messages in the way that you talked about the passion for coaching, but you could hear it in your voice how excited you are to be talking hockey all the time, and from someone who's known him for a very young age. Even when he was, in his late teens and 20s, where the guy was driving around the Belt Parkway just looking for something to do, which is a true story, by the way. It's great to see that you've gotten out of that loop of the circle and you continue to move onward and upward, man, because it's awesome. It's great to see.
Thanks, Lou. I really appreciate having me on and allowing me to share this.
It's good stuff. And to all the Thrive Loud listeners out there, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.